Ladies and gentlemen, today we have held very intensive, very useful negotiations with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Badr Abdelati. As you know, yesterday my colleague was received by the President of the Russian Federation. But during his visit to Moscow, he also held meetings with the Chairman of the State Duma Vyacheslav Volodin, Secretary of the Security Council Sergey Shoigu, and Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Overchuk. As you can understand, such a substantial program is in itself already a vivid confirmation of the very high level of traditionally friendly Russian-Egyptian relations. We welcomed their successful development in accordance with the Treaty on Comprehensive Partnership and Strategic Cooperation, which was signed by the leaders of our countries in Sochi in 2018. We are satisfied with the positive dynamics of trade, economic, and investment interaction. At the end of last year, the volume of bilateral trade turnover amounted to more than $10 billion, which exceeds the figure of the previous year by more than 12%. We highly value the productive work of the Joint Russian-Egyptian Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific, and Technical Cooperation. Its 15th meeting was held in Moscow on May 14th of last year. We are preparing the next meeting, this time in Egypt, and today we confirmed the important coordinating role of this body in increasing our material interaction. We discussed the progress of the implementation of major flagship joint infrastructure projects, primarily the construction of the El Dabar nuclear power plant and the creation of a Russian industrial zone in the Suez Canal economic zone. We paid significant attention to the prospects for expanding cooperation in the field of supplies of Russian agricultural products and energy resources. Of course, we spoke a lot and, first and foremost, spoke on topical issues of the international and regional agenda, confirming our common commitment to continuing close coordination at the UN and other multilateral platforms. Particular attention was paid to the most acute crisis of the current period, the unprecedented escalation in the Persian Gulf zone as a result of the unprovoked aggression of the United States and Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Both Russia and Egypt advocate for an immediate cessation of hostilities, for a return to the political diplomatic process for the purpose of settling existing differences and ensuring the security interests of all states of the region without exception, including the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf, friendly to us, and Iraq, and Jordan, and Syria, and Lebanon, and of course, the Islamic Republic of Iran. We reviewed the situation in the zone of the Palestine-Israeli conflict, which is now somehow disappearing from the front pages, and it seems to me this is undeserved because the problem has not gone anywhere. We emphasized the need to give a sustainable character to the truce in the Gaza Strip, which was reached in October 2025, largely thanks to the active mediation efforts of Egypt. We share a mutual concern regarding the development of the situation on the West Bank of the Jordan River, where the Israeli authorities are consistently pursuing a policy of strengthening administrative and legal control through the creation of more and more so-called settlements. We have a common conviction in the lack of an alternative to a comprehensive solution to the Palestinian problem on the existing international legal basis, which retains its force with a central two-state formula. We discussed the state of affairs in Sudan, noted the importance of developing coordinated approaches of the international community toward a peaceful regulation of the military-political conflict that has been ongoing for 3 years now, and confirmed a common position in favor of preserving the unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of the Republic of Sudan. We touched upon the situation in Libya, where a deep internal political split persists, the beginning of which was laid by the aggression of the West against this country in 2011. We agreed on the need to promote a comprehensive political settlement in this country, in Libya, with the leading role of the United Nations in order to find a solution that will take into account the positions of all ethno-confessional and political groups of the country, including, of course, the main groups in the East and in the West. And on this, we have a unified opinion. We discussed a number of practical issues related to cooperation between Russia and the African Union, spoke about the preparation of the third summit of the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum, which is planned in Moscow in the second half of this year, and of course spoke about the development of Russia's relations with the League of Arab States, whose headquarters is located in Cairo. And for this year, we plan to hold the Russian-Arab Cooperation Forum at the level of foreign ministers. We expressed gratitude to our colleagues for Egypt's objective and balanced position on the situation in and around Ukraine. We informed them in detail about the fundamental Russian approaches and about the evolution of the situation in the Ukrainian crisis, including the situation on the ground and efforts to settle this conflict based on eradicating its root causes. This is a fundamental issue. In general, as I understand it, we have mutual satisfaction with how we organized our work today. We will continue this work in the interests of further expanding multifaceted Russian-Egyptian cooperation. I thank my colleague and friend, and floor is his.
Thank you very much, my dear friend, His Excellency Minister Sergey Lavrov, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. Thank you very much for the warm reception and generous hospitality we have witnessed in your friendly country. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to be here today in Moscow and to express the Arab Republic of Egypt's great and deep appreciation for the historical relations that unite it with the Russian Federation. These are relations, as you know, that span more than 8 decades of friendship, cooperation, mutual respect, and common interests. At the beginning of this visit, I had the honor of meeting His Excellency President Putin, conveying to His Excellency the greetings and appreciation of his friend, His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and carrying a message from His Excellency the President, emphasizing our keenness to continue consolidating and strengthening the strategic relations between the two friendly countries, and continuing the existing coordination between them to deal with the pressing issues and crises that our world is witnessing today. As you know, Egyptian-Russian relations have witnessed increasing momentum in recent years, reflecting the political will of the leadership of the two friendly countries to strengthen various ties of cooperation in shared fields within the framework of the strategic partnership between them, especially following, as Mr. Lavrov mentioned, the signing of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement in Sochi in 2018. There is no doubt that the major projects currently being implemented in Egypt are a clear example of this strategic direction in the relationship, foremost of which, naturally, is the El Dabaa nuclear power plant project, which represents a historic step in the path of cooperation between the two friendly countries and also contributes to supporting energy security in Egypt and enhancing its technological and developmental capabilities in the long term. As you know, His Excellency President Sisi and His Excellency President Putin participated in the ceremony celebrating an important step in implementation, which was the installation of the reactor pressure vessel for the first unit at the station, coinciding with the Egyptian Nuclear Energy Day on November 19th last year via virtual communication. We in Egypt also attach great importance to the progress made in the Russian Industrial Zone project in the Suez Canal Economic Zone, in a way that achieves common interests through the transfer of Russian manufacturing expertise, and the Russian side's benefit from the favorable investment climate in Egypt. I met this morning with Russian companies that intend to participate in this important project. We also spoke about trade relations and the project to establish a logistics center for petroleum products and also for grains, to be located in Egypt as a logistics hub to support the needs of countries in the Arab region and also on the African continent. We look forward to the Industrial Zone project becoming an important platform for manufacturing, investment, and export. Today's discussions with His Excellency Minister Lavrov reflected full keenness to develop relations in the fields of trade, investment, industry, energy, tourism, technology transfer, and capacity building. Minister Lavrov and I were keen to emphasize the importance of strengthening cooperation in the fields of food security based on Russia's appreciated and important role as one of the largest exporters of wheat and grains in the world and the primary partner for Egypt in this field, and our aspiration to move together toward joint manufacturing, increasing added value, and utilizing Egypt's location to meet the needs of neighboring countries. Today, I also discussed with Mr. Lavrov ways to further enhance trade exchange and overcome any obstacles to the flow of trade. I also emphasized the importance we attach to further flows of Russian tourism, which we cherish, and which ranks among the top positions among markets exporting tourism to Egypt, through Egypt providing the maximum levels of safety and luxury for our friends, the Russian tourists. I also agreed with Minister Lavrov on the importance of increasing air connectivity between Egyptian and Russian airports and beginning to open new destinations for Russian tourists on Egyptian beaches and coasts, not only on the Red Sea, but also on the Mediterranean, especially in the charming city of Al-Amin, and starting to operate charter flights between Russian cities and the cities of Al-Amin and Alexandria in Egypt on the north coast. We also talked about the prospects for cooperation between Russia and the African continent in light of the outcomes of the second ministerial conference of the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum, which Egypt hosted last December. Ladies and gentlemen, as His Excellency Minister Lavrov mentioned, we talked about many regional and international issues, especially in light of the delicate circumstances the region is passing through in the Middle East, and indeed in the entire world, and the grave challenges we are witnessing. We talked about the current military escalation, which has begun to cast its consequences on all countries of the world, especially the countries of the global south, and specifically African countries, regarding energy security and food security. We exchanged views, and I informed His Excellency, the Minister, of the outcomes and content of the discussion that took place in the recent Islamabad meeting within the quadrilateral framework that brings together Egypt, Pakistan, Turkey, and the sisterly kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We talked about the extreme danger of targeting civilian facilities and energy facilities, and the escalating tension and obstruction of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, which represents one of the most important vital corridors for trade and energy supplies worldwide. we talked about the importance of de-escalation and the importance of the efforts exerted by Egypt in cooperation with Pakistan and Turkey to prioritize the diplomatic path, stop the escalation, and work on strengthening respect for the rules of international law and ensuring the security and freedom of navigation given its direct impact on the global economy. On the other hand, I reiterated Egypt's categorical condemnation of all the attacks and targetings that took place from Iran's side against the 6 sisterly Arab Gulf states and against sisterly Jordan and Iraq, emphasizing that these sisterly countries were never a party to the conflict, but rather contributed to efforts to reduce escalation and supported diplomatic endeavors to reach a political solution to the crisis. We also touched upon the situations in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. We emphasized the continuous Egyptian efforts to stabilize the ceasefire in Gaza and ensure the arrival of humanitarian aid, and the efforts exerted also to stop the grave Israeli violations in the West Bank, the latest of which was the Israeli Knesset's ratification of the law for the execution of Palestinian prisoners, a step that lacks the minimum level of humanity and represents a flagrant violation of the rules of international humanitarian law and the 4 Geneva Conventions, and the importance of the international community moving to stop these violations. I also strongly warned that the current military escalation in the region should not lead to distracting attention from the systematic violations Israel is committing in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and also in the Gaza Strip. We reiterate that there is no solution in the region except through a just settlement of the Palestinian issues based on establishment of the Palestinian state on the lines of June 4, 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital. We addressed the developments of the situation in Libya and the importance of supporting the sisterly Libyan people in determining their future, rejecting any dictates from outside, and the importance of speeding up the holding of presidential and parliamentary elections simultaneously. We also talked about Lebanon, and I strongly condemned the Israeli violations and the Israeli ground invasion of southern Lebanon, and emphasized the importance of implementing UN Resolution 1701. We discussed the situations in Syria and also the situations in the region and the importance of supporting the political path in the region. Finally, we talked about the situations in Sudan and the importance of stopping the suffering of the Sudanese people and preserving the unity of the Sudanese state and state institutions, and I informed Minister Lavrov of all the efforts we are exerting in this regard. Regarding the Ukrainian crisis, we emphasize the constance of the Egyptian position, calling for the prioritization of the diplomatic path, and our full support for the path of the recent trilateral negotiations in a way that contributes to reaching a comprehensive settlement that addresses the roots of the crisis and takes into account the concerns of the parties. I reiterated Egypt's full readiness to provide complete support for this path in a manner consistent with our principles to support regional and international security and stability. In conclusion, all thanks and appreciation to His Excellency Minister Sergey Lavrov for the warm reception and generous hospitality. We also extend our thanks and appreciation to His Excellency President Putin for his reception of Egypt's foreign minister, and this reflects His Excellency President Putin's appreciation for the relationship of friendship that unites him with His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and also the well-established Egyptian-Russian relations. Finally, we recall from the Russian memory the saying of the international writer Tolstoy, and I quote here, "The greatest truths are the simplest and most honest ones built on peace." These are the values that intersect with our extended relationship with Russia, those relations that we are keen to preserve, consolidate their pillars, and work to push forward under the leadership and sponsorship of Presidents Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Vladimir Putin.
Saad Khalaf, Al Arabi Television. The question is for both ministers. Your Excellencies, you pointed out in your remarks that important regional issues in the rapidly moving events in the Middle East were at the top of the topics you addressed during your discussions, specifically regarding regional security, including the situation in Iran and in Gaza. What are the prospects for strengthening coordination between Egypt and Russia on these files? And was there an agreement on specific steps to confront these challenges that the Middle East region is witnessing?
Perhaps one could speak for a very long time on this topic. I will try not to repeat the, let's be honest, alarming news that we read daily coming from the Persian Gulf region, the Arabian Peninsula, from Palestine, from Lebanon, from Syria, and the other hotspots mentioned today. Egypt and we have a strategic convergence of approaches. There may always be nuances, they are inevitable, but the strategic direction of the foreign policy of the Russian Federation and the Arab Republic of Egypt lies in the necessity of bringing the conflicting parties in any crisis toward dialogue. And this is not always simple, because sometimes serious contradictions are so provoked, and as a rule, they are provoked by external forces, that it is very difficult even to establish some form of communication. We are observing this in a number of the cases that were listed today, but this does not change the main point, that water wears away the stone, as we have a proverb, and it is necessary to achieve the cessation of hostilities and the start of negotiations. Only in this way can one be convinced of how sincerely the parties want peace and want a good future for their citizens, for the citizens of the respective countries. We very much value the role of Egypt, which in a number of crisis situations acts as a mediator and provides the Cairo platform for various meetings on several African crisis situations and on other issues as well. Egypt always shows initiative. It is by no means every time that this is loudly announced, because the main thing for our Egyptian colleagues, as for us, is not to skim off some sensational foam, if you'll excuse the expression, but rather to try to achieve a real result. And real work, of course, loves silence, and those who engage not in self-promotion, but in real work, will, I am convinced, ultimately succeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have nothing to add to what Minister Lavrov mentioned, other than to reaffirm that Egypt and the Russian Federation cooperate together and consult periodically, because there is a common interest in de-escalation and in not expanding the scope of the current conflict and military operations, or expanding their reach in a way that leads to the entire region sliding into a state of total chaos. Therefore, we are moving with Russia as a major international partner for us. We are moving with regional partners such as Pakistan and Turkey, and we are also moving at the international level with the United States and with all concerned parties to work on de-escalation. There is a convergence in positions regarding the importance of political solutions and the importance of promoting dialogue, especially since military solutions will only lead to destruction and further instability. Therefore, coordination is carried out between us on a periodic basis.
Hello, Sergey Viktorovich. Moscow has consistently called for prioritizing the politico-diplomatic path in the Middle East. It has called for a ceasefire to prevent the region from being drawn into a full-scale military conflict. Do you observe a response to Russian initiatives from the participants of the conflict, or are we on the verge of the conflict moving into a more dangerous phase? How is the work progressing on Bahrain's proposal for a draft resolution on the protection of commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz? What is Russia's position on this issue?
Нашу позицию не скрываем, мы ее регулярно озвучиваем, и в последние пару недель, наверное, в общем,
We do not hide our position. We voice it regularly. And in the last couple of weeks, probably, well, in general, since the start of the US-Israeli aggression against Iran on February 28th, we have been regularly commenting on our position and presenting our assessments of what is happening, including through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You have surely noticed that the presidential administration and the president himself regularly touch upon this topic in their contacts. In recent days, President Putin has had several telephone conversations with the leaders of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Before that, there were contacts with the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran, as well as through the foreign ministers. We are working in the closest contact with our Iranian colleagues. Yesterday, my telephone conversation with Foreign Minister Arakchi took place, and of course, with our friends from the Persian Gulf states. On Monday, March 30th, a video conference was held in which we discussed the current situation in detail for more than 2 hours, including how it is being discussed in the UN Security Council. You know, one can discuss the draft itself that Bahrain introduced and which has been under discussion in the Security Council for several days. And many do exactly that. They take the text and start discussing it. This is the professional approach of those who are ultimately responsible for the product issued by the UN Security Council. But even if we take this purely expert point of view, a large number of problems emerge. The key goal of this resolution, if we leave aside the description of complexities and the calls to Iran not to respond to strikes on its territory, if we leave all that aside, the central point of this resolution is a paragraph that authorizes all interested states, whether in a national capacity or states that have united into some coalition, to apply all necessary measures to ensure freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. During the negotiations, they added all necessary defensive measures, but immediately qualified it with proportionate to the circumstances. Who will define these circumstances? Of course, those very states that are given the right to apply all necessary defensive measures. It is clear what this is about. We know how it has happened before, when our Western colleagues took seemingly quite defensive Security Council decisions and immediately turned them upside down and used them for their aggressive actions. Second point, these measures are permitted, as I said, to interested states. But these defensive measures, proportionate to the circumstances, will also operate on the territory of those states, primarily the coastal states of the Gulf in the region, that will not participate in these defensive measures at all. This is a direct violation of their sovereignty. And of course, such a Security Council decision will hardly add, I won't even mention the authority of this body, it will hardly add to the chances of a peaceful settlement. All this is happening against the backdrop of statements coming from Washington, including from President Trump himself, that negotiations are underway, that the people the Americans are communicating with are much more reasonable. They listen, they react. The Iranians do not deny the fact of contacts, although they say it is not negotiations, but an exchange of positions. But nevertheless, it is already some kind of process. And when President Trump says, he said it the day before yesterday, I believe, that as soon as we finish the hostilities, and he explains that practically all tasks there have been solved. As soon as we finish the hostilities, navigation in the Strait of Hormuz will immediately resume on a normal basis. Well then, it means the problem is not that one simply needs to demand things from Iran, but that hostilities need to stop, and then the regime of the Strait will be restored, which fully relies on the 1982 Convention on the Law of the Sea, which defines all norms of navigation in peacetime. In wartime, it does not apply. Our Chinese colleagues, in contacts with their partners from the Gulf, emphasize the same points, that it is necessary to stop the military actions and then navigation will be restored. And you see, when people are being convinced that this resolution must nevertheless be adopted in the midst of what the US itself calls negotiations, it is clear that the adoption of a resolution that does not even mention that Iran became a victim of aggression will antagonize the authorities in Tehran. This means someone wants to undermine the negotiating prospects that had begun to emerge or were about to emerge. If, of course, everyone who talks about negotiations truly wants negotiations for peace. And undermining such intentions would, of course, be absolutely wrong. If, however, talks about negotiations are again planned to be used to carry out another attack on Iran under the radar, as happened in June of last year and in February of this year, well then this resolution is intended as a retroactive legitimization of all aggressive actions against Iran. The last thing I want to say in this area is from the perspective of legal interpretations. Our friends in the Gulf tell us that they were attacked, that Iran attacked them, and they have the right to self-defense, enshrined in Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. This is indeed true. This article exists, but in order to invoke it and take specific steps in the implementation of this right to self-defense, no Security Council resolution is needed. By the way, when the United States, together with Israel, began attacking Iran, they publicly stated that this was the implementation of the right to self-defense. In response to the question, how can that be, since Iran did not attack you? They said that Article 51 also implies action by way of preventive defensive measures, that is, as if to deprive the attacker of any prospects whatsoever, even if he had no such plans. And now, when people also talk, I asked our friends from the Gulf during the video conference, Has Iran really attacked you? There were no such facts, but an opinion is expressed in response that throughout these 70 years that the Islamic Republic of Iran has existed, it has wanted to attack its neighbors, and here a lucky chance turned up. It was attacked itself by the Americans and Israelis, so it has now started striking Arab states. I am sure that all these arguments, of course, perhaps they enter the media space with the best of intentions, but the end result is the same. Either this resolution is planned or will be used. Surely it was planned with the best of intentions, but either it will be used to disrupt the still very fragile chances for negotiations that have emerged, or it will be used to retroactively legitimize aggression against Iran. I hope that all our detailed explanations have been heard by our friends in the Gulf and in the Arab world as a whole.
Hello, Hussein Mashayekh, Al Qahira News. The question is for His Excellency Minister, Dr. Bedr Abdeladi. Your Excellency, the Middle East is facing instability through developments in the region, particularly the tensions associated with the war and the ongoing escalation within the framework of risks linked to the expansion of the conflict and its impact on the global economy. What are the concrete mechanisms that Egypt is pushing for to reduce the escalation, and what were the outcomes of your recent visit to Pakistan?
Certainly, the mechanisms are clear. They are the mechanisms of dialogue, negotiation, and the non-resort to military force. This is what Egypt always calls for. As you know, His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi leads all these efforts to push diplomacy forward and move the specter of escalation away from the region, because the region cannot bear it. The region is filled with many disputes and conflicts, and the last thing we expected was for another crisis to be added to them. As I mentioned, we are against escalation. We fully condemn all the attacks that took place against the sisterly Gulf states, against Jordan, and against Iraq. Escalation must stop. The current conflict must be contained and not expanded. This is what Egypt is doing through its efforts with all regional and international partners. The recent visit to Islamabad was at the direction of President el-Sisi to work on enhancing consultation with effective regional parties, and also within the quadrilateral framework to work on pushing all capabilities and all available possibilities to keep the door ajar for dialogue and diplomacy. All that we seek is for there to be a possibility for direct negotiation between the two sides, the Iranian and the American. We hope that logic and reason will prevail in managing this conflict, because everyone loses. The world loses, the region loses, and the countries of the developing world lose due to the severe negative repercussions regarding the waves of inflation we are witnessing as a result of rising energy and food prices resulting from the ongoing disruption in supply and distribution chains caused by the obstruction of international navigation. Consequently, Egypt will spare no effort and will not stop cooperating with regional and international partners, including the Russian Federation, to push in the direction of dialogue, diplomacy, and mediation efforts.
How is the interaction between Russia and Egypt developing in the cultural and humanitarian spheres? And will the Intervision contest take place this year? How is the preparation for it progressing? And is the Egyptian side ready to send its candidate to the contest? Thank you.
I will say that our cultural and humanitarian relations are at a very good level. This is not the limit. Today we spoke about additional projects that are already being discussed in this field and will certainly be implemented. I am sure that you know about the traditions of our interaction in the sphere of higher education. Thousands upon thousands of Egyptians received their education in our country, both in the Soviet Union and in the Russian Federation. An association of graduates of our higher educational institutions operates in Egypt. Our embassy maintains close contacts with these former students of ours. They are, of course, a connecting link, an additional connecting link already at the level of civil society, at the level of cultural structures and cultural organizations. Universities established contact between themselves quite a long time ago. They exchange experience, tours, and cultural exchanges. You mentioned the Intervision contest. Indeed, last year it took place for the first time in its new format in Moscow. 22 countries sent their performers, including the Arab Republic of Egypt. A representative of Vietnam won that contest. And this year, since all participants agreed to make this contest annual, our Saudi friends announced late last year that they are inviting this year's contest to their country. Now, I hope the situation around the Persian Gulf will calm down a bit, and our corresponding cultural organization involved in this will resume contacts with its Saudi colleagues. We hope that our Egyptian friends will again be represented at this event. I will also mention an upcoming event, the next World Youth Festival. It will take place in Yekaterinburg. In September of this year, Egyptian delegates have been invited, and I am sure that representatives of Egypt will participate in this truly great celebration. Interaction in the humanitarian sphere also implies cooperation along the lines of your colleagues, between journalists and between media corporations. TASS, RT Arabic, and Sputnik Arabic are working successfully in Egypt. Today, we just agreed that cooperation between our news agencies will develop. We will help each other organize interesting meetings for journalists of the two countries. In 2024, on our initiative, the International Fact-Checking Association was established. It has already held relevant international forums several times. The third international forum, titled Dialogue About Fakes, took place in September 2025. I think there is no need to explain how in the modern world, when lies are used not for some kind of salvation, as the Russian proverb goes, but when lies are used for direct harm, to inflict damage on those who bear no responsibility. Lies are used to shift blame from oneself, to arrange operations, as they say, under a false flag. And our Western colleagues, of course, have excelled in this art form. So, this International Fact-Checking Association fights this contagion that has now flooded the media space. It unites representatives of more than 50 states, more than 100 experts, an initiative corps of sorts. Egypt actively participated in the last conference, which took place last September in Moscow. I am sure that this cooperation will continue in this sphere as well.
Это сотрудничество будет иметь продолжение и в этой сфере. Спасибо.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much. I want to emphasize what Minister Lavrov mentioned. Cultural cooperation and humanitarian exchange are very important and are considered a cornerstone of the strategic relations that unite Egypt and the Russian Federation. We certainly take pride in the student exchange, youth exchange, and the exchange between university professors currently taking place. I was keen yesterday to meet with the leaders and heads of several think tanks and research centers here in Russia. Also, as we know, there was a year of Egyptian-Russian culture and a year of cultural exchange between the two countries in 2021, and there were major cultural events. We intend to participate in all upcoming cultural events, whether regarding Intervision or the current youth conference. We also value the existing cooperation in the media field between the two friendly countries, and consider that this contributes to increasing the cohesion between the two friendly countries and peoples. Thank you once again for this visit and this warm reception on the part of our Russian friends and on the part of my friend Sergey Lavrov.
من جانب الأصدقاء الروس ومن جانب صديقي سيرجي لافروف.